Welcome back to the channel. Today is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday, and if you're celebrating the messages of peace, brotherhood, and everything that goes with it, then this will be a good day for you. But for most of you out there, you're celebrating because it's a different type of day. We have a new president, new old president in Mr. Trump, and all the well wishes about what the next 4 years will bring, or perhaps longer, based on past statements and comments. But we shall see. This is all a journey that we're all on, and no matter how you feel about today or in the future, it's totally how we, the people, treat each other as individuals and as human beings. And I hope and pray that that message will continue to go a long way in the spirit of the King holiday. With that being said, I would like to talk about allegory. And for those of you who are not quite sure what allegory is, the word's tossed around a lot in circles, but according to my definition here, it is a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one, which means your allegory can be a story about perhaps a moral, how we treat each other, or it can be a political story about anything political. The first encounter that I came across what an allegory was my freshman year in my junior college. In my English class, I had my textbook and encountered the Allegory of the Cave by Plato. And my 18 or 19-year-old brain could not really understand what Plato was saying at the time. For example, when he mentions about when you're shackled in a cave, and when you step outside that cave, sunlight hits you and you feel inundated with the sunlight that's hitting you, that it really blinds you and you go back to the cave. Or the images of the shadows that pass by or are seen on the cave walls. I believe if that's true or not, but I have to go back and reread the allegory to make sure about that. And one thing I can say about what Plato was trying to express to us, that the sunlight represents knowledge, that we have been in a cave, we've been shackled, maybe kept from the truth, and when we step outside, knowledge hits us and it's so bright that we have to retreat back to the cave and return to captivity. And that is something that from his time to now is a common message and a common theme about really our lives as human beings and what we go through in this life, no matter what changes take place between countries, empires, you name it. There are always going to be individuals or citizens who are going to be shackled in a cave, who probably see shadows in their cave, and when they step outside to achieve knowledge or any kind of extra ability to see the truth, are blinded and overwhelmed by it, so much so that they go back into that. And I would say Plato was aiming for the political side of it in his allegory, but I would say that it is a useful tool if you want to tell a story without actually mentioning the topic that you would like to address. For example, I use allegory in a story such as Storm over South Central, right? But before I get to my examples, I would like to say that I would believe that the current or modern day form of allegories would be found in, let's say, the Twilight Zone, right? And of course, to some extent, well, really Star Trek as well. But I would say the 1960s was a time where you can use allegory to tell a story, because with the Twilight Zone, Mr. Serling would often use these fantastic tales to tell a story, such as the night well continuously turns black where a man is about to be executed, and then it's nighttime all over the land, all over the country, and it's shrouded in darkness, all because of the injustice, the racial injustice that was happening back in that time in the 1960s. Or you can say different stories throughout the show's run that you can point to and say, yes, that's allegorical for something, right? So Mr. Sterling was often good with that. I'm reminded of a story, and please, I know that historians will judge me if I'm wrong or not, but he wanted to write a story in Playhouse 90, I believe, and it was about Emmett Till. And the network was very resistant on that idea. So he had to change the story to a Mexican village in which a man was falsely accused, I guess. And so he just swapped locations from Chicago, where Emmett Till was killed, to Mexico. And that's because of the pressure of network sponsors. And that allegory, I'm sure Mr. Sterling would have written, if it was an allegory at all, would have been too hot for the networks, especially in 1950s when it happened. So he had to, that would give him the impetus to change or to start the Twilight Zone. And the stories that he chose, he didn't chose direct stories, he chose allegorical stories to tell his point about the human condition. If I'm right, please let me know in the comment section. But I would say, again, to some extent, Star Trek by Mr. Roddenberry was also an allegorical television show, in that Kirk and Spock and McCoy would beam down to a planet, they would solve the issue on the planet, and then they would go back. But a lot of issues in Star Trek had to do with the modern day issues of the 1960s, right? You can point back to the city on the edge of forever as an example. You can point back to any other examples in the series run that were simply allegorical, that the Enterprise or the crew of the Enterprise had to solve, or else that planet would go into absolute ruin, or the universe in absolute ruin, you name it. So allegory is very key, and for the networks, very profitable, if you can believe that, because they would love to see these shows on the air and make money for them, but at the same time, as long as the stories are engaging and they're exciting and they keep viewers coming back week after week like the Twilight Zone, Star Trek did, then they'll support that, even though the stories were in fact allegorical in nature and told a story about the human condition through the moral lens or the political lens that Mr. Serling and Mr. Roddenberry were writing about. And it's a very useful tool if you want to talk about a current day topic, and use it to explain your point of view of a subject matter. Storm over South Central, the title story of the book Storm over South Central, is written in the form of a cloud. And I think I can explain the cloud of blood, a rain of blood, right? A cloud that's red, and it rains blood. And that blood is infecting the community, and then it spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads until I'm not going to give you the ending of that. But living in South Los Angeles during this time period, I was wondering I don't know what my 22-year-old self was thinking at the time when I wrote the story, but I believe I wanted to tell a story that kind of showed everyone the examples of living under gang violence, and not only the type of violence that had existed in my neighborhood and in the community. So that's why I devised the story of the storm. What does the storm represent? I think I can tell you the storm represents many other things. If you can equate what happened in the 1980s in South Los Angeles and other places, and what does that red cloud represent, and what does that rain represent, I think you have a good idea. And the story is effective in the spreading of the cloud, because as people start to move out of the neighborhoods, they were also having problems in their community as well. In fact, there were some communities in the LA area that did not want to have the news shown that violence happened in their community as well. Outside of LA, they didn't want news coverage about that either, about certain community that had experienced gang violence, and they didn't want anyone to talk about it. But again, that's what the story or the allegory Stormer of South Central tries to portray. That again, just because it's there, you can't hide from the big cloud, because it grows and grows and grows until it reaches the inevitable conclusion, right? But it was my way of using allegory to tell a story, and it was a social matter. It was not specifically moral or political, but it was a social commentary of the way that we live back at that time. And if you plan to use allegory, you can also write about strange occurrence like Mr. Serling or Mr. Roddenberry use in their stories, or through the staff stories, to kind of express your idea on what is happening in the world around you, or historical, or you name it, political, moral, whatever the story that you write about. If you can use allegory to that strong effect, then you will definitely convince your readers to check out your work and support you in that way. But I would just say the use of allegory is definitely something that you will not get too you wouldn't get blamed for. No one will point you out. You're writing about this person, write about that person, because it's, it's a story. For one, it's fiction, but it's fiction with a meaning behind it, related to probably a social issue that you need to talk about. For example, if you talk about aliens who beat down an Earthman because he's an Earthman, then you're probably equating that to a racial type of situation, right? Because the aliens from this planet hate Earth people, so they would come down and beat the Earth people, and they would use their authority because they're part of space police, and you know, you can just say, okay, I get you. This is what you're talking about. So I would just say allegory is an effective use to tell a story with a political, moral, social meaning, and as long as you use it to great effect, then chances are your readers or your viewers will support you. And that's how I tend to write. And who knows, maybe in the next books in the next book that I happen to write, maybe I'll use allegory too, or maybe not. It depends on how you take the story. So I wanted to share that with you. Again, it's been a day. It's going to be a wild day. And it's going to be a wild time for us. But I really like to thank each and every one of you watching this and supporting me, no matter what I present here on this channel. I do wish you all the best, no matter what. And I hope you have a great day, great evening, a great week. And always in closing, take care.